this has a lot in common with the crazy early 90s cult film Frankenhooker, which features this mad scientist from New Jersey trying to rebuild his dead girlfriend with the body parts from exploded hookers. It's a crazy movie, and I highly recommend checking it out.
Want a date?
Frankenhooker.
So, we've gotten so many Frankenstein movies over the years. Some great and some terrible. Classic and beloved films like the original 1931 movie starring Boris Karloff, and also The Bride of Frankenstein. And also some truly awful films like sexy zombie Aaron Eckhart in I, Frankenstein, or even blaxploitation movies like Blackenstein. The characters, the themes, scenarios of, Mary Shelley's original work are timeless and will continue on to be adapted for years to come. Even now, I feel like there are 2 or 3 Frankenstein movies in some form of development as I speak, as I do this review, from creators like Guillermo del Toro or production houses like Blumhouse. But we have a new twist on the Frankenstein story with the film Lisa Frankenstein, and it's brought to us by director Zella Williams, the daughter of Robin Williams and also earthbending Mussolini.
I have created a new Earth empire.
And also Diablo Cody, the writer of films like Juno and Jennifer's Body. But to provide a bit of context, for this review, set in the late 1980s, a misunderstood teenager reanimates a Victorian-era corpse, and they embark on a murderous journey together to find love, happiness, and more body parts. Stylistically, I think this movie has a lot going for it, especially in terms of its production design and art direction. It's very easy to compare it to Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, blending the poppy, loud colors, in this case, the neon color palette of the 80s, with the dark, gloomy, gothic architecture of a creepy graveyard or the bedroom of a sad, weird girl. We get a lot of those aesthetics bumping into each other throughout the movie, and it really worked for me. Also, I just like the look of the 80s and genre films. Again, those neon colors of blues and pinks and purples, that aesthetic and culture bumping into the tight conservative nature of the 1950s suburbia is always a great setting for a coming-of-age story, or a film where aliens or zombies take over your neighborhood.
Good news and bad news, girls.
What?
The good news is your dates are here.
What's the bad news?
They're dead.
Also, they don't do certain things that I find so many films feel the need to do to let you know that the film is set in the 1980s. The obvious things. I feel like they don't force in the same songs we've heard a million times over, probably because they couldn't afford it. It's a relatively low-budget movie. But I appreciated that they didn't have too many obvious songs. The 2 big songs in the movie that I personally recognized were the Promise and Can't Fight This Feeling. But the rest, I feel like, were not often as used as much for movies set in the 1980s. Certainly in very obvious scenes. Also, the film's score was quite good too. It's very orchestral and surprisingly operatic sounding at times. But since this is a Frankenstein-esque love story, I suppose it ought to be. In terms of the performances, Catherine Newton and Cole Sprouse are the standouts as Lisa and the creature, respectively. I feel like Newton was able to play this role as broadly as she wanted to. Lisa is this very lonely, weird girl who is still reeling from a recent tragedy in her life, and she has to deal with like a cruel stepmother, played by Carla Gugino, coming fresh off of The House of Usher to great, critical success, and also her bubbly stepsister Taffy, played by Lisa Soberano. Her father Dale is played by Joe Crest. You probably don't recognize the name, but you know the guy. He plays Mike's dad from Stranger Things. It's some of the most obvious casting ever, but the guy literally plays the most perfect aloof 80s dad, I feel like, in the history of film or television. Constantly disengaged and showing no interest in many of his family members unless they love Ronald Reagan or football.
Am I done here?
Son of a bitch. You're really no help at all. You know that?
But he's pretty fun in the movie too. But you could tell Newton is having fun with her role, and she goes through quite the evolution or de-evolution throughout the film, becoming more unhinged and monstrous as time goes on. Watching her as we got to the film's third act, I realized that this has a lot in common with the crazy early 90s cult film Frankenhooker, which features this mad scientist from New Jersey trying to rebuild his dead girlfriend with the body parts from exploded hookers. It's a crazy movie, and I highly recommend checking it out.
Want a date?
Frankenhooker.
Her character does take a turn, and though we do see a number of characters being cruel to her throughout the film, I do wonder if mainstream audiences will vibe with the actions that she takes throughout the movie. And I mentioned Sprouse before, Cole Sprouse, as the creature. And he does such a great job despite how limited he has to be, despite his limitations. Much like Frankenstein monsters perform, Frankenstein creatures perform, he's unable to talk for the most part. And his entire role is just reliant on his physical performance and his reactions. They put him in some scenarios that I think are pretty funny, sweet, and even horrific. And he gets a lot of fun stuff to do in the film. To be honest, I was a little unfamiliar with him as an actor. And I was like, let me research this guy so I can find out a little bit more about him and see what else is being. And I was shocked to find out that he was not only one of the brothers on that Disney Channel show, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and I guess it's spin-off series. Not only was he also Jughead in the CW Riverdale series, but also him and his brother played the little kid in the Adam Sandler movie Big Daddy. That's the kid in that film. Who would have thought that cute kid would be playing a goofy, murderous, charming Frankenstein abomination 25 years later? But here we are.
Kangaroo shop, kangaroo shop, kangaroo shop, kangaroo shop!
All right! Also, unlike Newton, who I feel like becomes more monstrous throughout the film, we get to see kind of a return of his humanity to his character throughout the movie. Making him, in a way, a much more sympathetic character throughout the film in the long run. Again, like other Frankenstein monsters before him, where first they start off basically as this corpse cobbled together, basically as the mind of a child, but later on they're exposed to the world and they change, and in a lot of cases the Frankenstein monster becomes a better person. They become a human again, and I feel like that is very much the case with his character to an extent. Now, I've been praising this movie a lot, but I do have some big criticisms, specifically with the writing and Diablo Cody's screenplay. Cody's style of writing is a bit divisive, especially when it comes to dialogue, and I also feel character motivations. While I enjoyed the quirkiness and the humor of a film like Juno, I'm not the biggest fan of Jennifer's Body, for instance, which I felt had rampant story and tonal issues. And the humor was very hit and miss for me when I originally saw it. Lisa Frankenstein feels like it's caught in between those two movies. At the same time, it has the quirkiness, humor, and even warmth of a film like Juno. But other times, its humor is extremely hit or miss, and the tone is kind of all over the place. It has a lot of tonal issues. I really wish the script had a punch-up so these jokes would really hit. or not just have a awkward kind of shrug your shoulders moment and go, I guess we'll just move on to the next scene now. Also, I'm unsure of what Cody is trying to say at the end of the movie, particularly with Lisa herself. Her character goes through a very big change in the film, a change that I imagine would turn off a lot of people. Again, this is not very mainstream, and it would turn off a lot of people like watching her and even end up being repulsed by her. You know, I guess I would just like to know what point she was trying to make with the Lisa character. But I don't know. I was just kind of left frustrated by that aspect of the movie. And I guess that's what's bothering me, I guess, you know, because I feel like so much of the film does work in terms of its direction, actors, and aesthetics. All of that is there. But the story itself underserves all those things to a degree. So I can see a lot of people loving this movie. It most likely will go on to be a cult classic. But at the same time, others will be saying, what the hell is that? And they'll be left frustrated by it. You know, and I'm more in the middle where I see what's really working about this, and I am vibing with it. And there's just some stuff where I'm just like, yeah, I feel like you need to change this, or you could have improved the dialogue here, or this joke here, or maybe understand like kind of what's your point at the end of the day. I don't feel like they figured that out in this movie. That's what's so frustrating, because there's a lot of good stuff in there, and there's like greatness underneath the surface, but it's the screenplay that I feel like is holding so much of this back. It actually makes me really excited to see what Zelda Williams does next. I know that, of course, you know, she's been an actor and a voice actress, you know. I think she's directed some shorts. I haven't seen those shorts. I don't know if this is her feature-length debut. For all I know, it could be. But there's a lot of promise here. There's a lot of potential, and I want to see her do more things. Like, this movie hasn't turned me off. Like, I never want to see her do anything else again. It's like, no. She has talent. She's working pretty well with these actors. She has her team and the production design for this movie. They nail that. Like, all that's there. It's just maybe pair her with a different writer. I think that would be good. Or maybe have another writer come in here and be like, thank you, Diablo. We're gonna make some changes. We're gonna improve this. We're gonna punch this up a little bit. We're gonna take the bare bones of what you've done, but we'll make it a little bit better. Because I feel like that's what's inevitably holding this movie back from being really, really good for me. At the end of the day, I'm just kind of mixed. So I'm very interested to see where a lot of people fall on this film and what people think of it. Honestly, it's going to be divisive, and I don't think it's going to be for everyone. But I totally understand people that are going to completely vibe with it, and I think it will go on to be a cult classic, probably one of the big cult classics of the 2020s. But what about you guys? I'm curious. Did anyone else see the film this weekend? By the way, like, no one was in the theater with me when I saw this movie, aside from two other people. And I think it didn't do particularly well at the box office, although, again, had a relatively low budget, so maybe it'll eventually make its money back and do pretty well in VOD. I think this is going to have a dedicated fan base that are going to gel and vibe with this movie for many years to come. It's going to be, I think it'll be similar to a lot of like kind of cult 80s movies, although these movies are probably more critically and commercially successful. If you happen to be a fan of stuff like, I don't know, Fright Night, even maybe certain aspects of Monster Squad, stuff like that, you know, or Frankenhooker. It just feels like a combination. It feels like one quarter of it is Fright Night, another quarter of it is Monster Squad, the other quarter of it is Frankenhooker, and then the last quarter is Edward Scissorhands. And all that combined, boom, it cobbled together to create a Frankenstein monstrosity. That is Lisa Frankenstein. I feel like that's what this movie is taking from. But that's just how I feel. What about you guys? How do you feel about this movie? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Did you even know about it? Please go ahead and let me know.
5 minutes later.
I needed this tiebreak review. I heard two extreme reviews, one saying it's crap, one saying it's a modern classic, so I'm confused. the horror and murders have me lean towards ignore, but the comparisons to Heather. Oh yeah, Heather's. I should have mentioned Heather's. You are absolutely correct, Serenity. I don't know why that didn't occur to me. Yes, there is a lot of Heather's DNA in this movie. And some people love Heathers and others do not. And I think that's very much the case for Lisa Frankenstein. Yeah, okay, it's fifths. A fifth of it is Fright Night. A fifth of it is Monster Squad. Another fifth of it is Frankenhooker. Another fifth of it is Edward Scissorhands. And the final fifth, definitely Heathers. No question about that. I should have said that in my review, honestly. I'm going to add that in. It's also Heathers, too. There you go.